Mooted to create jobs is the small business sector, and the finance minister yesterday giving a tax break for small businesses aimed at helping businesses with an annual turnover with less than 1 million rand. Those with a turnover of less than 350,000 wouldn't pay tax, and the maximum rates been halved from 6 to 3%. So how far would these proposals go to help the economy and absorb labour? Well, a pleasure to welcome Nazeem Martin, MD of Business Partners Limited, and Alex Smith, FNB economist. Gentlemen, thanks for coming in. Nazeem, I'm going to start with you. We already seen reaction from the Small Business Minister, Lindiwe Zulu, happy about the allocation given to her department and also about those proposals announced by the minister. How significant are they in terms of changing the landscape for entrepreneurs?
I think they are significant from the perspective that for the first time, I think government is recognizing the role that small business can play. In fact, it's listed, unlocking the potential of the small business sector is considered to be one of the 9 priority areas in this year's budget. Having said that though, and as a financier of small businesses and a businessman myself, I think one can always ask for more. So whilst one's happy with the fact that there has been a bit of a break for small businesses insofar as taxes are concerned, the question is it enough, and is it aimed at the right small businesses? And if one looks at the businesses that are going to benefit from that, effectively you're talking about micro enterprises, because in order to have a turnover of less than 300,000, it means your monthly turnover is about 25,000. You're talking about a real micro enterprise employing possibly one person. If you're talking about businesses with a turnover of less than R1 million, on average you're looking at monthly turnovers of about 80,000 rand. You're talking at the lower end of a small business. Very often those are the businesses which are wonderful and important for our economy, but they don't necessarily create a lot of jobs. They often create a job for the entrepreneur and 1 or 2 members of his or her family. It's the businesses which are slightly bigger than that that create jobs for the entrepreneurs, the members of their family, and 5 to 50 other people. And we think the minister might have missed an opportunity to raise that threshold from 1 million a little bit higher in order to ensure that we have more business and more entrepreneurs out there who would benefit from this and could therefore go out and create more jobs.
Alex, more than that, I guess, the reason for casting the net over the informal sector, for example, is quite simply, you get more tax money, you boost the coffers. And that's going to help what we are seeing with this projected growth of the South African economy, dropping further and further, closer to 2% now. What was your take on that?
Yes, absolutely. This is the 5th consecutive year where Treasury's had to revise down its GDP growth forecasts. And that's really what's behind these tax increases, is the fact that revenue has just disappointed consistently year after year because GDP growth has been too slow. You can't really grow tax take if the economy isn't growing. So this is the difficult decision that Minister Nene has had to make in this budget, is how do you make sure that the economy still grows but that you actually boost revenues and try and narrow that budget deficit over time? Because of course the rating agencies are standing looking over his shoulder at this stage. We have already had some sovereign rating downgrades last year. So South Africa does need to do something about this budget deficit, and that's why we saw these taxes being implemented. But it is a very sensitive time for the economy. Last year we got the slowest GDP growth rate since the financial crisis. And obviously we've got these issues around Eskom and electricity supply, and that was a major issue mentioned within the budget. So government needs to do a lot in terms of adjusting policy to make things more business friendly for people in the economy, and to deal with a lot of the structural issues in the economy, which include infrastructure shortfalls and electricity supply issues. And encouragingly, they have allocated quite a lot of money over the next 3 years to dealing with those issues.
All right, a business-friendly environment like you mentioned. What has come out was this allowance for a one-stop registration for small businesses, Nazeem. Does it go a long way to take away that burden, to take away the administrative frustration that small businesses confront? Do you like what you heard yesterday?
I like the fact that government is looking at having a single procurement desk where you register once. You may have a little bit of red tape in ensuring that you can register by getting your BE certificate and tax compliance certificate, but once you're on that database, then you have access to, or you may be informed, I guess, and you certainly will be able to provide government wherever it is. I hope it would be at provincial, national as well as local level with the required goods and services. So initially maybe a bit of red tape for compliance, but thereafter I think the world's your oyster. You are then, provided you can yield or render the goods and services, provided that you are compliant, provided that you can do it within the time frames required, then you can supply government at all levels. And I think what's more important, I think, I'm hopeful that not so much with what was said in the budget, but certainly with the president's speech of last week, where he made a bit of a promise indicating that of all government procurement spend, 30% would be earmarked towards procuring from small and medium businesses. Now, if government lives up to that word, not only if they live up to the word, but also if they then pay small businesses on time because they have a bad history of paying a little bit late, then I think we certainly would have something really positive for small businesses from this budget, together with the promise made by the President in his State of the Nation address.
It was my next question. I mean, this 30% of government procurement going to small business, seeing is believing, it has to be tangible for us to measure it.
Ideally, one would have wanted to hear something like, we are currently procuring 10 or 15% of our procurement spend is from small business. We are targeting 30. We don't know what the baseline is, but 30% is a good place to start. So one's comfortable that at least there's an opportunity for small business. Small business is being taken seriously. A whole range of other things are being done for small business, including something you alluded to a little earlier, the allocation to the new Department of Small Business Development for training, mentorship, and handholding and support services for small and medium businesses. Because I think more than money, I think handholding and mentorship is probably as important, if not more important, than making sure that SMEs or small businesses get money or access to finance. So all in all, I think one has to read the budget in conjunction with the President's promise, probably also in conjunction with what each of the ministers are going to say over the coming weeks when they get to the detail as to how exactly they're going to spend their money that's been allocated to them, and whether that is going to end up in the hands of small business or not. Okay,
Alex, I want to shift focus now. Let's get into the subject of government debt. It's riding in the 40%. We have some commentators this morning getting up and saying, yes, we've had some positive outcomes of this budget, but that debt is scary. Could we eventually see ourselves as in the same scenario and position as Greece, for example? I've heard people say that.
I think that's a little bit extreme. I mean, just to put it into context, South Africa's net debt is a little over 40%. Greece is about 175%. But what's important to bear in mind is not the debt load itself, but the debt service costs. And our debt service costs are quite high, and also the growth rate of that debt. So our debt load since the beginning of the financial crisis in 2008 has almost doubled as a percentage of GDP. And it's increased by about 1 trillion rand over that period. So it's been a dramatic increase in debt. And that's really the issue, is that the trajectory is quite concerning. And especially when you compare us to other emerging market economies, that increase in debt has been far more noticeable than many other countries. And that's what the rating agencies are concerned with, and that's what I think many analysts are talking about at the moment. And that is obviously why this budget has been quite tight, why the minister has been forced into increasing taxes against a relatively weak economic backdrop. What concerns me, though, going forward is that once again, we've got some, what I think could be relatively optimistic forecasts around revenue growth going forward. So there are still risks on the revenue side that we don't meet those forecasts. And also on the expenditure side, there are risks. Most notably the fact that there's only been 6.5% annual growth allocated to the wage bill. And we know that public sector wage negotiations are ongoing at the moment. And the wage demand that's been tabled is well in excess of that amount. So with the public sector wage bill accounting for about 30% of total government spending, that's a massive, massive risk. So government needs to do its best to curtail wages so that it can refocus onto infrastructure spending to boost the potential growth of the economy.
I'm going to have to leave it there. Gentlemen, thanks indeed for coming in. Alex Smith from FNB, an economist, and the MD of Business Partners, Nazeem Martin. Thanks indeed for talking.